My name is Daniel, 32 years old, living in a small apartment on the outskirts of Minneapolis. I work as a factory worker, repeating long, exhausting shifts every day, counting every penny to get through the month. My life isn't complicated, but it's heavy. The weight of family responsibilities presses on my shoulders, and the sacrifices I make go unnoticed. That day, I was sitting in my old car, its engine wheezing like it was gasping for air in the November cold. Next to me on the passenger seat was a small wooden box containing my collection of vintage stamps, a gift I had spent 6 years perfecting. Each stamp was a story, a piece of memory I hoped would touch my father's heart. He used to love stamps when he was young, spending hours under the desk lamp, carefully arranging them in an album. I thought he would understand. I thought he would be proud. My parents' house sat at the end of a snow-covered road, the golden light spilling from the windows like a warm invitation. Thanksgiving was always a time for family to gather, but for me, it felt like a test I could never pass. I took a deep breath, clutched the wooden box to my chest, and walked inside. Inside, the smell of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie filled the air. Mom was bustling in the kitchen, her silver hair disheveled, her smile tired but gentle. Dad sat at the head of the table, shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes as sharp and cold as ever. Michael, my younger brother, was telling some story, his voice animated, hands waving. He always knew how to steal the spotlight. I stood at the threshold, trying to smile, but the feeling of being out of place clung to me tightly. "Danny, you're late," Dad said without looking up. His voice was dry, as if my presence was just a minor detail in his perfect picture. "Sorry," I replied, setting the wooden box on the table. The car was acting up again. Michael glanced at me, a half smile on his face. "You should get a new car, Danny. That pile of junk is about to fall apart." He laughed loudly, and Dad chuckled along as if it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. I bit my lip and didn't respond. That's how Michael always was, always finding ways to make me feel small, and Dad always backed him up. Dinner began. We ate and talked, but I felt like an outsider. Michael went on about his new project, some tech app, vague but full of promise. Dad nodded, his eyes lighting up. Mom chimed in, asking me about my job, but her question was cut off by Dad. "What's Danny got to talk about? Same thing every day," he said, waving his hand dismissively. My heart tightened. After dinner came the gift-giving, our family tradition. Michael stood up, pulling a bottle of wine from his bag, its label shimmering under the light. "French wine, 1975, he announced proudly. "Found it at an auction. Dad, I thought you'd like it." Dad took the bottle, his eyes gleaming. "Michael, you sure know how to pick a gift. This must have been expensive, huh?" He laughed, patting Michael's shoulder. "Classy, very classy." Mom nodded, and Michael shrugged with that fake modesty I knew all too well. The whole room clapped, as if he'd just done something monumental. Then it was my turn. I stood, my hands trembling slightly as I opened the wooden box. "Dad, I wanted to give you this." I placed the stamp collection in front of him, the stamps carefully arranged in protective sleeves. "I know you loved stamps when you were younger. These are vintage from the 1920s, including that German stamp you used to talk about." I stopped. Dad was looking at the collection, but not with admiration. His lips curled into a mocking smile. "Stamps?" he laughed, his voice icy. "Danny, what's this cheap gift? You think I'm a kid playing with these things?" My face burned. I thought you'd like it. It took me years to collect." "Years?" Dad interrupted, his voice growing harsher. "And you still picked something useless like this? Michael brings wine and you bring, what, a pile of scraps?" He pushed the wooden box away as if it dirtied the table. Michael smirked, shaking his head. "Danny, seriously, you should try investing in something worth more." He winked at Dad, and they both laughed as if I was their punchline. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to suppress the heat rising in my chest. "I just wanted to make you happy," I said, my voice small but firm. I thought you'd see the value in it. Value? Dad raised an eyebrow. Danny, you're always like this. Mediocre, useless, only making things worse. Sit down and don't ruin the mood. Mom looked at me, her eyes apologetic, but she said nothing. Michael shrugged and sipped his wine. The room returned to laughter and chatter as if I didn't exist. I sat down, my hands still clenched, the pain cutting through my heart like a sharp blade. But the tension didn't end there. While clearing the table, I overheard Michael bragging about buying a new speaker system for his music studio. I knew that studio, a failed project that cost our parents $16,000, not to mention the other luxury items he'd bought. I didn't plan to say anything, but when Mom complained about the rising heating bill, I couldn't hold back. Michael, you should spend more carefully, I said gently. You've already spent a lot of Mom and Dad's money, like that studio. If you keep going, it'll be tough for the family. The room fell silent. Michael stared at me, his eyes narrowing. What did you say? You jealous, Danny? Jealous because I know how to live and you're just nagging? It's not jealousy, I replied, trying to stay calm. I'm just worried. $16,000 isn't a small amount, Michael. Mom and Dad can't keep supporting you forever. Dad slammed the table hard enough to make the wine glasses shake. Daniel, that's enough. You have no right to lecture your brother. Who do you think you are? A failure like you only makes things worse. I froze. Failure? My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. I work, I help pay for the heating, I try for this family, I just want what's best for everyone. Best? Michael sneered. You're just a whiner, Danny. Don't act all high and mighty. Dad nodded, his eyes cold as ice. Listen to your brother, Danny. You can't do anything right. Don't ruin our holiday. I looked at them. Dad, Michael, even Mom, who just bowed her head in silence. I realized something. They didn't see me. They didn't see the nights I worked overtime, the times I paid the heating bill out of my own pocket, the sacrifices I quietly endured. They only saw Michael, the golden son, and me, the spare. I stood up, clutching the wooden box to my chest. I'm sorry for being a bother, I said, my voice calm but cold. I'm leaving. Danny, don't, Mom called, but I was already out the door. The cold outside slapped my face, but it didn't hurt as much as the words in that room. I got in the car, set the wooden box down, and drove away. In my mind, one thought became clear. I couldn't keep living to please them, not anymore. I drove back to my familiar apartment, a small space just big enough for a bed, an old wooden table, and a feeble heater that sputtered every winter. But it was the only place I felt safe, where I could breathe without fear of judgment. The night after Thanksgiving, I sat at the table, the wooden box containing the stamp collection still unopened. The dim light shone on the stamps, each one a piece of my heart poured into a gift for my father. But now they only reminded me of his mocking smile, of Michael's sharp, cold tone. I sipped cold coffee, trying to chase away the dull ache in my chest. A week later, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. Danny, the heater's broken again. Dad says the bills are high this month and it's tough to manage. Can you help? I stared at the message, my fingers hovering silently over the screen. This wasn't the first time. Over the past 2 years, I'd spent more than $10,000 to keep the family home warm. Heating bills, furnace repairs, even the emergency pipe replacement last winter, all came out of my pocket. I didn't complain, didn't boast. I thought it was my responsibility, a way to keep the family together, even if they never noticed. I remembered the first time Mom called, her voice trembling over the phone. Danny, the house is so cold, Michael's away and Dad doesn't want me to worry. Can you? I cut her off, promising to take care of it. The next day, I sent $800 to fix the heater. I worked extra night shifts at the factory, cut back on personal expenses. No new coat, no dining out, not even a vacation. My apartment was freezing because I saved money by not turning on the heat. But I thought it was fine, as long as Mom, Dad, and Michael were comfortable. I opened my laptop and checked my bank account. $2,300 left. Not enough to get through the month if I paid the heating bill again. But I still transferred $600 to Mom, along with a short message. "I've got it. Take care, Mom." She replied with a thank you emoji. Nothing more. Dad didn't message, neither did Michael. I closed the laptop, a hollow feeling creeping into my chest. They didn't know what I'd sacrificed, and maybe they didn't care. Meanwhile, Michael lived like money grew on trees. I scrolled through his social media knowing I'd regret it. Pictures of him in a fancy restaurant, a new leather jacket, an expensive bottle of wine gleaming on the table. Another post showed off a speaker system for his studio, top-tier tech, he wrote. And that was the same studio that cost our parents over $16,000, only for him to abandon it because he lacked inspiration. Mom and Dad didn't blame him. "Michael's still young," Dad once said, his voice full of leniency. "Everyone makes mistakes." But when I suggested Michael spend more wisely, I was the nag, the failure. I remembered a time a few months ago when I went to my parents' house to drop off money for a plumbing repair. Michael was there, showing off a new watch. "Hublet," he said, raising his wrist. "Only 50 in the world." I looked at Dad, hoping he'd say something, but he just smiled and patted Michael's shoulder. My son knows how to live. I stood there, clutching an envelope with $1,200 in cash that I'd sweated and toiled to earn. Yet I was treated like I was invisible. When I handed the envelope to Mom, she thanked me quietly, but Dad didn't even look at me. Michael was too busy taking pictures of his watch to bother glancing up. I wasn't jealous of Michael, honestly. I just wanted fairness. I worked 12-hour days, counted every penny to support the family, while Michael spent recklessly and was celebrated. I didn't expect them to fall at my feet in gratitude, but at least they could see me. See the nights I stayed up worrying about bills, the times I skipped buying things I wanted to send money home. But no, to them I was just Daniel, the one always ready to pay, the one not worthy of respect. That day I sat in my freezing apartment watching my breath form faint clouds of white. The heater had been off for a long time. I couldn't afford to turn it on. I thought about Thanksgiving, about the stamp box Dad pushed away, about his and Michael's hurtful words. I thought about the $10,000 I'd spent, about the sacrifices no one saw, and for the first time, a thought flashed through my mind, sharp as a blade. Why should I keep doing this? I picked up my phone and opened Mom's message. "Danny, can you help?" I stared at the words, my fingers hesitating. I wanted to reply, to say I'd take care of it like always. But then I remembered Dad's voice. Mediocre, useless. I remembered Michael's smirk, the nag. I set the phone down without responding. My heart felt heavy, but somewhere deep inside, a flicker of relief sparked. Maybe it was time I stopped being a hero for people who didn't need me. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into the heating service account. The bill from last month, $650, was still paid from my card. I stared at the number, remembering the extra shifts, the dinners of instant noodles, the times I skipped buying a new coat to send money home. I clicked on the cancel service option. A pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel?" I hesitated, my finger pausing over the mouse. Images flashed through my mind. Mom shivering in a cold house, Dad frowning at the dinner table, Michael showing off his new watch. But then I remembered Thanksgiving, the hurtful words, the feeling of being treated like I didn't exist. I clicked confirm. The screen displayed a message, service canceled, effective December 1st. I closed the laptop, my heart pounding. Part of me felt guilty, as if I had just betrayed my family, but the larger part, the part exhausted from sacrificing, from being taken for granted, felt relieved. For the first time, I chose myself. The next morning, I called the heating company to confirm that all payments from my account had been stopped. The person on the line asked, "Are you sure?" "It's going to be a cold winter," I replied, my voice calm. "I'm sure." When I hung up, I looked out the window. Snow was starting to fall, each white flake quietly blanketing the street. I thought about my parents' house, about the heater that would no longer run, about the cold they'd soon face. But I didn't change my mind. I had given too much and they only took, never giving back. I put the stamp box in the cabinet and locked it, as if locking away a piece of my heart. I wasn't angry at Dad, didn't hate Michael, and didn't blame Mom. But I was tired. Tired of being a hero for people who didn't need me. Tired of trying to prove my worth to those who couldn't see it. Canceling the heating service was the first boundary I set. It hurt, but it was necessary. I stood up and turned on the small heater in my apartment the first time this winter. The warmth spread slow, but enough to chase away the chill. I sat down, sipped freshly brewed coffee, and felt a spark of freedom stirring in my heart. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. On December 2nd, the real cold hit. I heard on the radio that the temperature in Minneapolis had dropped to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, with biting winds that cut through the skin. I pictured my parents' house, the spacious living room, the silent furnace, the chill creeping up from the wooden floor. I wondered what they were doing, how they were feeling, but I didn't call. I couldn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew that if I gave in, I'd fall back into the old cycle. Sacrifice, be taken for granted, then sacrifice again. My phone lit up constantly. Mom texted, "Danny, the house is so cold. I don't know what to do." "Can you talk to Dad?" Dad called, leaving a voicemail, his voice a growl. "Daniel, what the hell are you doing? Canceling the heat in the middle of winter? Are you that selfish?" Michael sent a long string of angry texts. "You're heartless. You think you're so great, abandoning the family? Traitor." I read them but didn't reply. Each word was like a knife, but I didn't let them cut deep. Not anymore. I scrolled through social media and saw Michael's new post, a photo of him in a fancy coffee shop, his leather jacket gleaming with the caption, "The cold can't touch me." I shook my head. He was still the same, living as if there were no consequences, as if the money he spent recklessly wasn't our parents', as if the cold in their house was a trivial matter. I turned off my phone, not wanting to see more. A week later, Mom called. I answered, though I knew I shouldn't. Her voice was weak, trembling. "Danny, I'm sick. The house is too cold. I can't take it, Michael. He's stressed, you know. Dad's angry, but he doesn't want me to tell you. Danny, can you help?" I gripped the phone, my heart tightening. "Mom, I've paid over $10,000 for the heat. I've done everything I could, but Dad and Michael call me useless. I told Michael to spend wisely, and they said I was jealous. What do you want me to do?" She was silent, then sighed. "I know you've sacrificed a lot, but Michael, he needs time. Dad's just hot-headed. You're the older brother, Danny, "I can't," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "I can't keep paying the price for Michael's mistakes or Dad's insults. I'm sorry, Mom." I hung up, my hand shaking. For the first time, I said no to Mom. Guilt burned in my chest like a fire, but I didn't back down. Dad called next, his voice even angrier. "Daniel, who do you think you're punishing? Your mom's sick, Michael's stressed, and you're sitting there playing selfish games? Do you want the whole family to freeze to death?" I listened but didn't respond. He shouted a few more things, then hung up. I knew they were cold. I knew Mom was sick, Dad was furious, and Michael was blaming me. But I also knew the truth. They only reached out when they needed money. When I gave the stamp collection, they mocked it. When I advised Michael, they insulted me. When I paid the bills, they stayed silent. I wasn't a son or a brother to them. I was just a financial resource, and I was tired of it. In my apartment, I turned on the heater and warmth spread through the room. I looked out the window as the snow fell heavier, blanketing everything in white. I thought about my family, about the cold they were enduring. Part of me wanted to call back, to pay for the heat, to make things like they were before. But then I remembered Thanksgiving, the wounds carved into my heart. I sat down, opened a book, and let the cold out there belong to them. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't responsible for everything. One December morning, I woke up early, my breath no longer turning to white clouds in the apartment. The small heater hummed quietly, spreading warmth throughout the room. I brewed coffee, its aroma filling the air, and sat by the window watching the snow fall silently. I had bought a new book, The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, from a used bookstore near my place. I read slowly, savoring each sentence, letting the story sink into my heart. Before, I never had time for books. Every dollar, every free hour went to my family. Now I was taking them back. I started cooking. Not instant noodles or dry bread to save money, but real meals. One evening I made beef stew, the scent of herbs and red wine rising from the pot. I played jazz, Miles Davis, the trumpet's highs and lows telling a story of their own. I ate alone, but I wasn't lonely. I savored each bite, listened to the music, and felt at peace. For the first time, I didn't think about Dad, Michael, or the insults from Thanksgiving. I thought only of myself. I bought a new coat, deep green with a warm fleece lining. It wasn't expensive, but it was something I'd wanted for a long time. When I wore it outside, the cold no longer bit into my skin. I walked through the park, snow crunching under my boots, and smiled at strangers. An old lady selling cookies at the street corner called out to me, "You look happy, young man." I bought a bag of cookies, thanked her, and realized she was right. I was happy, truly happy. Sometimes I thought about my family. I imagined their cold house, Mom wrapped in blankets, Dad scowling, Michael posting boasts online. Part of me still hurt. I wasn't heartless. But whenever guilt crept in, I remembered the stamp box Dad pushed away, his voice calling me useless. Michael's smirk when I urged him to save money. I had spent over $10,000, worked extra hours, and neglected my own needs, only to be met with disdain. I didn't owe them anything more. My phone was quiet now. Mom stopped texting, perhaps realizing I wouldn't respond. Dad didn't call, and Michael didn't send more angry messages. I stopped checking his social media. I didn't need to know what he was showing off. I tucked the stamp box into a corner of the cabinet, unopened. It was the past, and I was living for the present. One evening I sat by the heater, book in hand, jazz playing softly. The firelight danced, casting warm shadows on the walls. I thought about the years gone by, the sleepless nights worrying about money, the times I swallowed tears after Dad's insults, the sacrifices no one saw. I realized something. I didn't need their validation. I was good enough, worthy enough, even if they couldn't see it. This small apartment with its coffee, books, and music was my world, and for the first time it felt like enough. One late December afternoon, the doorbell of my apartment rang. I was reading, soft jazz playing, the small heater humming. I frowned. Nobody came by without notice. I opened the door, and there stood Dad, his old coat worn at the shoulders, his face gaunt, his breath forming clouds in the cold. His eyes were still sharp, but there was something weary about them, as if the winter had drained his strength. "Danny," he said, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in?" I hesitated but nodded. He stepped inside, glancing around the apartment, the wooden table, the heater, the open book on the chair. He didn't say anything, but I knew he was comparing. His house was bigger but now freezing. My apartment was small but warm. I poured coffee, setting 2 mugs on the table. He sat, hands clasped tightly as if holding something back. "The house is cold, Danny," he began, not looking at me. "Your mom's sick, coughing all night. Michael, he's stressed, lost his job. You know how hard it is for him." I stayed silent, waiting. I knew he hadn't come to apologize. He never apologized. "You canceled the heat," he continued, his voice low but sharp. "In the middle of winter, what were you thinking? Trying to punish us for a few words said in anger?" I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. "Dad, it wasn't just a few words. You called me useless, mocked the gift I spent 6 years collecting. I told Michael to save money, and you said I was jealous. I spent over $10,000 on heat, but no one noticed. How do you think I felt?" He frowned as if my words were absurd. "The gift? That pile of stamps? Danny, are you serious? Michael gave wine, something valuable. You brought scraps of paper and expected me to be touched? I clenched my fists but didn't get angry. I was past that stage. Value isn't just money, Dad. I thought you'd understand because you used to love stamps, but it's fine. I don't need you to understand anymore. He slammed the table, making the coffee mugs tremble. Don't lecture me. You're selfish, Danny. Your mom's sick, Michael's struggling, and you're sitting here, warm, not caring if your family freezes. I looked at him, my gaze steady. I care, but I'm tired. I can't keep paying for Michael's mistakes. He spent $16,000 of your money on watches, speakers, wine, but you don't blame him. I paid bills, worked extra hours, and got called a failure. You want my help? Fine. But Michael has to cover half the heating costs from his own money, and you and Mom need to stop enabling him. He froze, then scoffed. Ridiculous. Michael's struggling. He needs time. You're his older brother. You're supposed to help. You want him to take responsibility? That's family business, not your place. Not my place, I cut in, my voice cold. I sacrificed so much for this family. And now you say it's not my place. Fine. If you choose to protect Michael over fairness, then you deal with the consequences. He stood, his face flushed. You ungrateful brat. Petty, always causing trouble. I raised you and this is how you repay me? He pointed at me, his voice shaking with anger. You'll regret this, Danny. You'll be alone and no one will need you. I stood and opened the door. If that's what you think, then let me be alone. I'm not afraid anymore. Cold wind rushed in, but I didn't shiver. He glared at me, eyes full of rage, then walked out without looking back. I closed the door and returned to my chair. The jazz still played, the heater still hummed. Dad's words were like knives, but they didn't cut deep. I knew I was right. I had given too much and they didn't deserve it. I picked up my book, continued reading, and let the cold out there belong to him. The winter in Minneapolis was harsher than I'd imagined. The radio reported temperatures dropping to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, with winds howling as if they could tear everything apart. I sat in my apartment, the small heater humming, a book in hand, but my mind sometimes drifted to my parents' house. I didn't call, didn't text, but I knew they were struggling. Not because I wanted them to suffer. I just couldn't keep being the only one to sacrifice. One day in mid-January, I got a message from Aunt Linda, Mom's sister. Danny, your mom has mild pneumonia. She's staying with me for now. Their house is too cold. They couldn't stay there. I read it, my heart tightening. I thought of Mom, her disheveled silver hair, her tired smile at Thanksgiving. I wanted to call, to ask how she was, but then I remembered the time she stayed silent when Dad insulted me, when Michael mocked me. She loved me, I knew, but love wasn't enough to change things. Aunt Linda texted again. Your dad sold your grandfather's antique watch to pay for temporary heating. But it's not enough. They're putting the house up for sale. I was stunned. The watch, a family heirloom Dad was always proud of, something he once said he'd pass to me or Michael, was gone. The house where I grew up, where laughter once filled the air, was now just a listing on a for sale sign. I thought I'd feel pain, but instead a hollow emptiness settled in. My family, the thing I'd sacrificed everything to hold together, was falling apart, and I couldn't do anything to stop it, nor did I want to. Michael, as always, lived in his own world. I no longer followed his social media, but Aunt Linda told me he'd been fired. The startup he'd invested in had collapsed. He moved out, crashing with friends, but still posted photos in his leather jacket as if the cold and his failures couldn't touch him. Mom and Dad had no more money to enable him, and for the first time, Michael had to face the consequences himself. Dad, who always defended him, was now just angry and powerless. Aunt Linda said he spoke less, often sitting alone in the cold room, staring out the window. The house sold by the end of January. I saw the listing online, a brief post with a photo of the snow-covered house, priced far below its true value. I imagined my parents packing, Mom coughing in her old sweater, Dad scowling but helpless. I didn't know where they'd go or how they'd live. Aunt Linda said Mom wanted to call me, but Dad stopped her. He doesn't care, he said. I didn't blame him. To him, I was the traitor, the selfish one. He didn't see the $10,000, the stamp collection, the nights I worked overtime. He only saw Michael, and now, even Michael was gone. My family fell apart not because of the cold, but because of cracks that had been there all along. I once thought I could patch them with money, with sacrifice, with love. But I was wrong. I alone wasn't enough. I sat in my apartment watching snow fall outside the window and realized something. I wasn't the one who destroyed the family. I was just the first to walk away from the wreckage. Winter passed, and I'm still here in my small apartment. The heater still hums, but now it's the sound of peace, not a burden. I no longer have contact with my parents or Michael. My phone stays silent, no texts, no calls. Sometimes I wonder what they're doing, but that curiosity fades quickly like snow under the early spring sun. I'm living for myself, for the first time in my life. Every morning I brew coffee and open the window to let the cool breeze in. I read books, Hemingway, then Orwell, then slim volumes of poetry I find at the used bookstore. I listen to jazz, letting Coltrane's saxophone guide me through long evenings. I cook, homemade spaghetti, roasted beef with herbs, buttery cookies. Each meal is a gift to myself, not something I cut back on to send money home. I've started walking more. The park near my apartment has become a place where I find stillness. I sit on a bench watching children play in the snow, their laughter ringing out. Once, I ran into the old lady selling cookies again. "You're still happy, young man," she said, her wrinkled smile warm. I bought a bag of cookies, thanked her, and realized I wasn't just happy, I was free. Work at the factory is still grueling, but I no longer take extra shifts. I save money not for someone else's heating bills, but for myself. I bought a new desk lamp with a softer glow. I signed up for an evening drawing class, not out of ambition, just because I wanted to try. My pencil strokes on paper are clumsy, but I smile as I draw. And that's enough. Sometimes I think about Thanksgiving, the stamp box, the things Dad said. I'm not angry at him anymore. I don't hate Michael, don't blame Mom. They're part of me, but not all of me. I used to think family was where I belonged, something I had to sacrifice everything to hold together. But I was wrong. Family isn't the people who take your worth away. It's the ones who see you, truly see you. And if they don't, you have to see yourself. I no longer seek validation. I don't need Dad's pat on the shoulder, Mom's thanks, or Michael's apology. I'm enough right here in this small apartment with its old heater, home-cooked meals, and yellowed books. I live not to prove anything, but to enjoy. One early spring evening, I sat by the window watching the city lights twinkle. The snow had melted, but the chill lingered. I thought about a question. Was I too harsh, canceling the heat, refusing to help, walking away? Or was it necessary to protect myself? I don't have a clear answer. What about you? If you were in my shoes, what would you do?